Welcome to Conversations for the Animals. I am Lisa Tynan with Houston PetSet, and I am joined today by my former colleague, stand-up guy, Adam Reynolds, who is the Chief Investigator for the Houston SPCA Cruelty Division. And I'm excited about today because having been in animal welfare for a very long time, one of the things I've always sort of noticed is that people don't really understand the process of what happens when there is a cruelty report and why isn't everybody in jail? Yes. I think is the number one question. Like, sure. Why isn't this person in jail because he did this crime? So today we're going to do the how a bill becomes a law version of filing a cruelty report. And I'm hoping you can explain to us sort of from point A to point jail or whatever the outcome is. What happens when somebody calls and sometimes what doesn't happen and sure. why it doesn't happen, because I know that is a big question. So for starters, I do want to, just so that people are aware, there are two main anti-cruelty sort of divisions here in our region. There's the Houston SPCA, and then there's the Harris County Animal Cruelty Task Force. You are separate, but you are both beholden to the same laws and processes yes. and procedures, right? So what we are talking about is specific to the SPCA, but can be kind of generalized out.
Absolutely.
Okay, fabulous. So that now that we have that under in our brains, that will help us go through. So before we dive into that, Maureen, tell us about how you fell into animal welfare, because I have a feeling this was not where you saw yourself ending up necessarily.
Yeah, so mine's kind of a funny story. I retired from the Marine Corps after 21 years, wanted to come back to Texas more than anything. I have degrees in Homeland Security and safety and security leadership, so, knew that I was going to go into government work. But at that time, when I retired, it was during sequestration, so okay. there weren't a lot of government jobs to be had. So the easiest way for me to come back to Texas was oil and gas. I took a job with a company as a security and environmental consultant where I would respond to natural and man-made disasters and help them mitigate through that, as well as, throw on a suit and do PowerPoints to Big Oil and tell them how to protect themselves from international and domestic terrorism, which was right up my alley. It was an enjoyable job, but I realized after 5 years I really just missed the team aspect.
Okay.
I missed, me as a solo act. It was kind of boring. So, I remember, sending out feelers, but do not remember ever applying to the Houston SPCA. I'm still convinced to this day that my wife hacked my account and sent a resume because she watched Animal Cops Houston every day and would tell me about it. And, the show broke my heart, and I would tell her there's no way I could ever do that job. That job is, just so mentally and emotionally draining. But out of the blue, I got an email. So I came, I interviewed. They asked me back for a second interview. When they did, they invited me into the boardroom, and all of the investigators were there, and they interviewed me.
I had no idea.
That's when I was hooked. I inherited a team of 5. We built it to a team of 10. And I am blessed to go to work every day with incredible teammates that are trying to do their best to help out the city and the surrounding counties.
And it's, for off the top of your head, like, did the people who you work with also come from non-animal backgrounds? I mean, I found that to be true in a lot of animal welfare, with some exceptions. And I feel like a lot of cruelty investigators were either in animal control or were vet techs or in some way involved with animals.
Yeah, it's a weird split. I have investigators that went to Texas A&M as animal science majors. I have investigators that are prior military, 3 of those. I have ones that were studying to be vet techs and just kind of moved up. I have ones that grew up in the Houston SPCA that started out in call center and animal care specialists and moved their way, through the ambulance and then to us. So it's a really weird mix, but somehow we all get along.
Somehow it works. Well, that's it has to be a team, because of the way that the cruelty process works. It's no man is an island here,
Absolutely.
or no woman is an island. So you all are very much working together. So I want to start at the beginning, because so many people know that you exist, but don't know how to get to how to file a cruelty report, how to get the knowledge that they have. So let's say I am Susie, homeowner, and I look out my window and I can see into my neighbor's backyard, and I see a dog, and I said, that dog looks looks skinnier than it should be. And I keep an eye on it, and I see for 3 days in a row, nobody's come out and nobody's fed that dog. So if I'm Susie, what's my first step? Because I know a lot of times people are like, well, somebody should do something.
Sure.
And then they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and we rely on those people. The first thing I would say is absolutely file a report. Even if there's a question, file the report. We'll go out if it's not, something that's, in violation of Texas state law. That's okay too.
Yeah.
But at least we have the report, and at least we try to intervene or to investigate to see if it is something.
It's erring on the side of caution.
Sure, absolutely, and we understand that, and we take all those cases with a grain of salt, and we're not upset or disappointed when we get there, and it's
there's no cruelty.
Nobody's getting arrested on the side. That's okay too. At least we're checking out, and that's what we do.
Okay, and so in order to file a report, do I call? Do I go online? How do I get in touch with your team?
Yes to all.
All of the above.
So you can, most of our come in through our call center. 713-869-7722. You call the number. You'll speak to an operator who will take all your information, and then they will create a case and then pass that to the investigator that's closest to that area.
Okay.
You can also go online and file a cruelty report. We love those as well. That goes directly to the investigator for that area. But we also have, there's other ways that that information comes into. Sometimes it's social media posts, and we have a team that's constantly watching social media, and when they see these things that seem to almost go viral, then they let us know so we can go take a look. I get letter mail every now and then.
Really?
I do. And some of them are actually, they're legit cases. We work closely with local law enforcement, so sometimes they call us directly. But that there's a multitude of ways that information comes in to create the initial report.
And so you said each investigator has an area, so it's broken up by.
So we do key maps.
Key maps.
So
okay.
if you remember the old days, in the gas station with the maps, we still do it that way because that's the way law enforcement does it too, and the appraisal district divides that up as well. So we try to stick to that. Each of my investigators has their chunk of Southeast Texas, and then they all have a district partner that's also watching their cases on the days that they're off.
Okay.
Sadly, they always want a day off. So,
how dare they want to take a break? And how far does this net go? It's not just Harris County, right?
Yeah, so it's Harris County and the 7 surroundings. So as far north, Liberty, Montgomery, all the way down to Galveston, and then west to Fort Bend. But we also try to, we'll help anybody, as far as our donating dollars will take us.
That's awesome.
We just last week we were in Houston County in Crockett, Texas, so an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
But we got a call, and we could help. We could muster up the people and the equipment and to get up there and help, and I think it was a good thing that we did.
That's good to know. So the next step then. So I have called and I have filed a report, and it has gone to one of your investigators. What is the first thing that investigator is going to do? Is the first thing is they get the address, they look at it, and they say, all right, and they load up their car and they go?
In a perfect world, sure. But remember that all of my investigators right now probably have a caseload of 50 to 75 cases.
Active cases at one time.
Active cases. So we need to triage our cases each day to make sure that we get the medical issues and the abandonment issues. But we will respond to every case that we get. It may not be, the second that it comes in, but we will get to it, and we will respond. Even the ones that we think, it's just,
It might be an education case.
Absolutely, and we're fine with that. That's, honestly, that's the way, we envision the program. It's a program of education first. We don't want to involve law enforcement and get a warrant and remove animals. And,
right.
We want you to follow Texas state law,
Sure.
and that's it.
So when you're talking about triaging, obviously at the very top is animals who are on the verge of, are in imminent danger, right?
Absolutely.
So kind of move down the list, if you could, about what we view as immediate need, and then to something that you'll get to eventually.
So that's, we call it, the medical cases, obviously, ones that are, injured, actively bleeding, all of those are a high priority.
Okay.
There are lots of high priorities, but we try to, we try our best. Animals that have been abandoned. So animals that are locked inside a residence that have no way to get food or water.
Okay.
Those are a high priority as well. hoarding cases, ones that are cruel confinement, animals that are trapped or locked inside, horrible living conditions. Then there's the shelter calls, the food water shelter that we get a lot of. Those are probably a little bit less down the list, but still, the longer that they wait, the more important they become. So we try not to let a lot of time elapse in between those as well. And then it's again, there's not. Every day is never the same. The list of cases are never the same, but we try to triage each one. And not only that, but all of the investigators, we're all looking at each other's cases as well. So if one is having a slow day of food, water, shelter calls, and there's a lot of medical, well, then we'll just shift focus and get somebody out there immediately. So.
Okay, because I know we. Previously, I would see these, but also we see these on Facebook a lot where someone will say, I called the SPCA or called the task force and nobody's come out. Is there like a general length of time you tell somebody, like, we'll try to get to it within X number of days,
we try
not
hours? We try not to overpromise.
Yeah.
And the call center usually does a pretty good job of explaining that to the complainants.
Yeah, it's order of when they come in and importance and all that. There's a lot going into it. Okay, so now we've decided what cases. They have a list of cases. They say, okay, the first one I'm going out to see is X. When they get there, we should preface this by saying cruelty investigators are not police officers.
Correct.
Right. So when they get there, what do they do? What can they do? What can't they do when they're on somebody's property?
Sure. So in a perfect world where Adam gets whatever he wants, it would look something like a knock at the door, an adult answers the door, and I explain to them who I am, who I'm with, and why I'm there. I can't, and I ask very politely, can I please see your animal? I can't make you. I can't push my way in. I have a badge and a license as a private investigator in the state of Texas, but that gives me zero added authority.
Right.
For that matter, if I was a sworn peace officer, I don't have probable cause, so I can't do that either.
Okay.
So we just, we're there to gather evidence. So surprisingly, most people will, let us in, let us see the animal. If we do, we will typically, again, all cases are different, but typically we would leave a notice. We would leave a detailed list of the things that we see that are in violation of Texas state law, whether that's penal code or health and safety code, and then give them a path towards compliance. This animal is very skinny. It needs to be seen by a licensed veterinarian. Yeah. You should do that within 3 days. You should follow all vet recommendations. And then we schedule follow-up to provide them that time to accomplish that.
So if somebody is home, obviously this is your perfect world. We know that's not always the case. Sure. So if you roll up and you can't see an animal, you have someone has filed a complaint and you cannot lay eyes on those animals. I'm assuming you post a notice on their door. How frequently are we coming back and checking up on that animal? How often do we try until we say, look, we just couldn't gain entry and we don't know?
Yeah, so typically we'll leave what we call a notice to call. It's a smaller version of a notice because we didn't see any violations.
Okay.
And the notice will simply state, this is who I am, who I'm with, and why I'm there, and to please contact us. If we don't see an animal, it gets more difficult. Right. It's really much easier, and there are more options if we can see the animal and you're not wanting to engage in a conversation.
Right.
But again, it's we post a notice, we follow up. We'll post a notice, typically a second notice, and follow up. And then depending on depending on the complaint, will depend on if we involve law enforcement to where we can start maybe find a phone number, find a way to get a hold of them to try to see. But honestly, if we don't see anything, if there's nothing to see, then that's going to take a lower priority because it's going to be harder to push.
So if I'm going back to my alternate persona of Susie Homemaker, if I have witnessed the state of this animal and I'm the person who made the complaint, it's probably good if I can get some sort of photo or video to send you, right? Can you act on that even if you are not able to get eyes on them?
Well, not necessarily we would act. We would still do our same process, but it would definitely help law enforcement in their decision if they decide to pursue it, to go further. Okay,
so then let's take that next step then. So if, let's say you have gotten eyes on the dog or you haven't, but you've got evidence that something is happening, since you are not police officers, what is their role? Because do you have affiliated police officers who work just with you?
Yeah. So we have 2 contract deputies through Precinct 1 Constable's Office, and they assist us on all scenes where we need their assistance.
Okay.
Licensed private investigators, we're not sworn peace officers, so I don't carry a weapon, and I don't get warrants. So that's what they're there for, to protect us on the more dangerous scenes, and then also to get warrants if it's deemed necessary. So that's that next step. And typically, again, typical case, after that second visit, if they've refused to comply, usually after that second visit, we're having the conversation with law enforcement. We're showing them all the photos that we've taken. We're showing any evidence that's been provided by the complainant, giving them our sworn affidavit of what we see. And then based off of that, then they'll make the decision, okay, let's go get a warrant.
Right. So this is the point, I think, where a lot of animal lovers get a little bit lost in the process, because what us as the average animal lover looks at and sees as an emergency situation isn't necessarily considered an emergency under the law. But there are circumstances, exigent circumstances, where those animals can be seized right away. What's the process like to actually get an animal removed from a situation?
Well, let's start with the exigent. Exigent means that I believe, and I can articulate in words, that I believe that animal is going to die in the time that it takes the deputies to get a warrant, which is about an hour and a half.
Okay. So that's urgent.
Yes.
Okay.
If I am there and I see this and I get a deputy to come out, because I can't do it just myself,
right.
But with a deputy on scene, then we can use any means necessary to get that animal into a vehicle, to get it back to the shelter, to get it seen by our veterinary team.
Okay.
That's a lot of power to have, and we never want to abuse that.
Yeah.
So those cases are, not few and far between. I mean, we do have a number of them, but that's, again, something that is, I feel, very delicate, that we need to, make sure that everything is done exactly the way it should be, to not abuse that power. Right. Well, for law enforcement to abuse that power.
Sure. So if it is not exigent circumstances, though you still need a warrant.
Absolutely.
Unless the owner signs them over.
Correct. So again, with the priority being education, and if education's not working, maybe we can convince them and help them to understand that the circumstances that their animals are currently in is not ideal. Right. And that maybe the best thing for them is to surrender them to a shelter where they can get proper veterinary care and get healthy and then get adopted. That would be the focus. When that doesn't work, then we have to have a warrant to remove property, which animals are property in the state of Texas. Right. We always use a civil seizure warrant in order to do that, not a criminal search warrant. Okay. So, especially when we take the Texas A&M vet students out every week, I tell them, if you're excited about watching somebody kick a door in, and do all the stuff that you see on TV, that's not going to happen. Yeah. It's a civil seizure warrant because civil seizure warrants are covered under Health and Safety Code 821. That means that case has to be heard by a judge within 10 days. Okay. They get one chance for an appeal, and then that's it. So we're with the animal's best interest in mind, it's in our care and custody, 21 days, then it can get adopted.
So, and you sped past it, but you mentioned the Texas A&M vet students. So the Houston SPCA has a partnership with Texas A&M College of Veterinary Medicine, where these veterinary students come and do a 2-week mandatory rotation, and part of that time they get to spend with y'all. And the benefits of that are that they get to see how animals live.
Yeah. And they get to see it real world. And, we can describe, things when we come back to the shelter with these animals, but, honestly.
Till you've walked into a hoarding house.
Yeah, and it's hard to describe. I mean, it's, again, we were in Crockett, Texas on Friday last week, and, it was deplorable conditions, and it's, words don't describe it. I mean, we have to take video and still photographs, and even that, it doesn't really do it justice.
Until you're standing in there. Okay, so back to our bill becoming a law. So now that you've somehow the animals come into your custody, whether it be through owner surrender or through the leaving notice, going back, getting a warrant, or through exigent circumstances. Sure. Now you have the animal. Okay. What's the next step?
So the first step when the animal comes in is to get it seen by our awesome veterinary staff. They get a cruelty exam, so it's a nose to tail, everything exam, because we're going to need, that animal, and the information that we get from that animal is going to be probably the best piece of evidence that we will ever gather that we can put before either a judge or, maybe eventually a jury.
Right.
And we only get one shot at that. So, our concern or our priority then is the processing of evidence, getting all that information, and then, getting the care that animal needs. And they'll be in that phase through the civil hearing, which again, the case has to be heard within 10 days. If we go to court and the owner, will not agree to the order, then we'll wait another 10 days for them to file for an appeal. Once that time has passed, then the animal is legally ours, and now we can, get it healthy, get it adoptable, and get it out there.
So while they're in the care of the veterinary staff, what are they able to do and what can't they do? Because they're technically their evidence, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not our animals yet. So they can do anything they need to do to care for that animal. So obviously, everything from feeding to getting, necessary treatments in order to get them healthy. We can't do elective surgeries, so we can't do spay neuters. Anything that's kind of like in that gray area of, not just keeping the animal alive, we're not allowed to do because it's not our animal yet.
So, if you have the animals, because if anyone has seen photos of animals that come from hoarding cases, they're generally in very poor body condition, matted head to toe, curled toenails. Some of that is considered like emergency medical care.
Absolutely.
So they can do emergency grooming, but
Yes.
not just like, the dog smells kind of bad or the cat's got some matting.
Yeah, it will get any of that that's obviously necessary. Especially when we see even we talk about nails that are growing so long that they're into the pads.
Yeah.
Matting is severely painful, so they will get a shave and a haircut and
Two bits.
There you go.
So. Obviously, it's not just dogs and cats.
Sure.
The Houston SPCA sees all types, right? And,
We do.
And anyone who's ever watched Animal Cops, horses, cattle, pigs, all of those come in. Are the rules different for livestock animals?
The only difference for livestock rules are if it's a stray. There's a longer stray period for horses. And honestly, we don't see that many strays, thankfully.
Yeah.
But that's really the only difference. We still use the same warrant, the same tactics, the same framework to seize any kind of animal.
Any kind of animal. The biggest difference there being what constitutes inhumane treatment is different for livestock and non-livestock animals. Like sheltering wise.
So when people like to call and say, there's a horse outside and it doesn't have, it's not in a barn. Well, Texas state law doesn't say it has to have. It has to have a windbreak. It still has to have access to food and water, but a horse outside, just outside is not
sort of what they do.
It's livestock.
Yeah. Okay. So now we've got our animals in the care of the Houston SPCA, and the hearings happen. So they do go in front of a civil judge, a civil court.
JP judge. Yeah.
What is happening? If we're closing our eyes and picturing Law and Order,
Sure.
what's actually happening in the courtroom?
So I'll take you before that happens.
Oh, yes.
Before we even go in front of the judge, we'll go into a deliberation room. We'll sit down with ourselves. I usually bring the Texas A&M vet students, the deputies that are with us, and the county attorney. We will all sit in a very tiny room, and we'll wait to see who shows up.
Yeah.
If you show up to your hearing, we're going to bring you back. The county attorney kind of takes over the show, and he explains to them what's happening. People get a warrant and people get a summons to come to court, and they really, some don't know. I probably wouldn't know. So he explains to them, this is a civil hearing. This is not a criminal case. Right now you're being sued. The county is suing you for two things. We're suing you for ownership of the animal.
Okay.
The Houston SPCA wants that animal to be divested from you to the Houston SPCA. And then also the cost of care. What did it take for us to pay to care for that animal from the time of the seizure until 5 o'clock that afternoon? After that, all costs incurred go to the Houston SPCA, and we're fine with that. Those are the two things that we're looking for. And then the county attorney explains, here's your options. You can agree to that order, which is what we really want. We'll put you on a payment plan, with no interest, and then the animal can, start immediately getting that care. But sometimes they don't, and they want to go in for a judge, and that's their right, and that's fine. If we do, the other reason why we really like the agreed order is that waives a right for an appeal, so we don't have to wait the 10 more days.
Right.
We can immediately start doing all those other things to get the animal healthy. maybe I'd say out of our cases, maybe a third of them go into that category where people will just agree to the order and go on. The other option is you don't agree to either one of the two options or just in general. I'll gladly pay you the money, but, I want my dog back. In that case, that's your right, and we're going to go in front of a judge.
Okay.
We will put on our case, and when I'm done, you can ask me questions. Then we give you a chance to present your case, and we're going to ask you questions, and then the judge makes their decision. If they don't like the judge's decision, that's when the clock starts ticking. They've got 10 days to file for an appeal. Or if they don't file for an appeal, we wait that 10 days. As soon as that 10 days is up, we usually call to verify just to make sure that they didn't. And then we can release that animal from court hold and proceed on.
To whatever its outcome is. Do you generally find that people are rolling up with an attorney, with witnesses, or is it a little? I'm not trying to paint it in a negative light, but it's a little bit David versus Goliath sometimes because you roll up with some experts.
Yeah. So and we do it. 5 times a week. We do see people do come there with an attorney. I will say the majority of the ones who come with an attorney, either one of two things. Either they believe that this is a criminal trial and not a civil trial, and they haven't really fully explained it to the lawyer that's come in, or it's they want to test out the case before in their mind they know it is going to go criminal, and maybe they just want to test the case out. So we'll see a lot of that as well.
So what would push a case into criminal? Is that just if it's a felony charge of cruelty, or what makes something civil versus criminal?
Well, after we file everything civilly, then we take all that information and we create a criminal packet. It's really the same information that we use in our civil case, because I don't like doing the same work twice. Just do it once really well, and then we'll use that same information. So we take our information along with the deputy's information, we compile it into a packet, and we give it to our ADA, and we let her make the decision. Do you think this meets the criteria for a criminal case? And many of them do. They do.
So that power kind of rests, obviously the evidence is important, but the power rests in the ADA's hands, the assistant district attorney. And this is, just forgive my ignorance, but is there one is this county? What is their jurisdiction? And is there a different person in every area, every courthouse that you go to?
It's usually there's at least one. In Harris County, we have two. Well, a primary and a secondary. And they hear all of the animal cruelty cases for Harris County. Each county has their one as well.
So it's a county role.
Yes.
Do you find? I feel like I already know this answer. Do you find that different counties have sort of a different commitment level, a more willingness versus a reluctance to accept these as criminal cases? You don't have to throw anyone under the bus, but
I would say maybe when I first started, I felt like that was the case. I think people get it now.
Well, that's positive.
And especially and maybe it's because we walk them through all of the steps to explain to them. Here's why it is a big deal. I would say everybody's doing a much better job. Of course, some more than others. More rural communities, they just have a different precept about livestock animals. But, when we're able to explain to them the severity of it and explain to them that it is a violation of Texas state law, and we try to end every single hearing with, and you as a professional witness, would you say that this is an event of animal cruelty? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So you should do the right thing.
Done and done. So then if I, again, going back to Susie Homemaker, how I don't want to say invested, but like how likely would it be that my case that I believe to be animal cruelty is actually going to rise to the level of animal cruelty that we're talking about here? I mean, not every case is a criminal case.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could put a number on it, but knowing that we try to explain the why.
Okay.
Because again, what does a response look like? A successful response in our eyes can be anywhere from, you didn't have a shelter. We explained to you Texas state law says you need to have a shelter.
Yeah.
We found you a shelter, and now your dog has a shelter.
Yeah. Okay.
Success. That's success.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that your dog doesn't have a shelter and I'm going to come and I'm going to take it and then say you can never own a dog again.
Right.
Maybe that's not successful.
Right.
So the spectrum is going to be somewhere in between there. And, we try to work with both the complainant and the suspect.
From the complainant's point of view, and a couple episodes back, we had some cruelty investigators from the task force, and the process to file a report is ever so slightly different. I mean, I know they allow theirs to be anonymous. You don't allow anonymous reports, correct?
Well, we do.
You do. Okay.
We do allow anonymous reports, but we still ask for your phone number because
Right.
we want the investigator to have a chance to speak with you.
Right.
Maybe there's something that we didn't catch in the call center, or maybe something else has come up in the case and we have a question about it. So we'd like to be able to contact that person. But if you file online, I mean, you can still file anonymously, and that's it.
Yeah. And I know for a fact that people like to follow their case.
Mm-hmm.
Once I filed a cruelty report, what do I get to know about what's happened?
So we try to explain that we're not going to provide updates on
You're not
cases.
going to call and say, so today we went to court.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that, and it's for a few reasons. One is to pertain, or to maintain the integrity of the case.
Sure.
But also we understand the need to know that something's happening.
Right.
It's kind of a fine line, right? So I mean, sometimes people will call, file a complaint, and then a week later there's a phone call of like nobody's doing anything.
Yeah.
And I take those phone calls, I pull up the case, and I can see the because my investigators fill all of their stuff out with all their visits, and I try to explain to them, again, education first.
Yeah.
But also know that the case is still open, that an investigator is pursuing it, and that we're going to get a positive outcome. Whether that looks positive to you,
Right.
It may not mean the removal of an animal, but it may be having the animal not be outside of compliance with the law.
Right, and I think that's you took it exactly. You teed me up right here. I think one of the hardest things as an animal lover is to separate what we believe to be the ideal living conditions for an animal versus what Texas state law
Sure.
dictates. And y'all have to operate within Texas state law. Personal
Right.
feelings aside,
Absolutely.
everything has to be done within what Texas has said is humane shelter, which is why the Safe Outdoor Dogs Act was so great, because now
Yes.
it actually defines
Yes.
what is shelter.
Yes.
So you can walk into a backyard and say for sure that dog does not have adequate shelter according to the law, not just according to how
Your
I would house
chained
it.
up dog underneath an old car
Not
is not shelter.
Hallelujah.
Before that law, I mean, we still held our belief on what shelter is: 3 solid sides, a solid roof, and a solid floor.
Mm-hmm.
But the law said it did not easily define what shelter is. It was a very gray area. So, the law was that bill was great. It did help
It
a lot.
enables y'all to do your jobs and also helps the pet owners and the animal lovers of the community be able to see something and know right off the bat, yeah, that dog has been sitting out in the rain in a wire crate. That's not shelter. I know
Right.
that for sure. Now I can call and file a report. So I guess the last thing would be, if I'm this, I think I know the answer to this one too. But if I've filed a report on, a dog or a cat or a horse that I have seen, and I've kind of been tracking it, and maybe I've called and I suddenly see it come up available for adoption on the website. Can I adopt the animal that I reported cruelty on?
Yeah, there's nothing.
There's nothing that says you
that
can't.
says you can't. My take on that would be, let's go through that same scenario. Your next door neighbor, and you filed a report, and now you've removed that animal from their property, and now it's living successfully on the neighbor's property.
Yeah.
I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. The homeowners association going to hear about that.
Yeah. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you.
Just an interesting thing. So, animal cruelty, obviously a bad thing. We have a lot of phenomenal animal cruelty investigators. We have animal control. We have a lot of people working out there, working together. And it's heartening to know that you exist, but obviously there are a limited, you said you have 10 cruelty investigators for how many square miles?
I haven't even
I don't
calculated.
even know.
It's
but
a lot.
8 counties that you're covering. So, one of the things that I guess we would ask of listeners and viewers is to just kind of have an understanding of the scope of what is going on. And I hear it as a person who manages social media in the past for the SPCA, but now for Houston PetSet, a lot of what we see is, well, they just don't care. They're just not doing anything about it. But having spoken to y'all and having spoken to the task force, we know that's not the case. There's just a lot of animal cruelty happening.
There is.
And everybody's very busy and trying to respond to these calls as fast and as efficiently as possible. So I think just hopefully what everyone has taken away from this process is that there is a process, there is a procedure. I thought of what it was. Pause. Remember. Okay. So one thing that I have experienced personally in my profession is people intervening before cruelty investigators have a chance to get there. And I know just from my experience that can ruin the whole case, right?
Yes.
So what can somebody do and what can't they do? Like, can I throw food onto the other side of a fence? Is that just ruined the entire appearance of animal cruelty?
Maybe not ruined. When we're talking to an animal that is in severe neglect, it's not going to necessarily ruin the case. Okay. We would prefer that you didn't. Okay. If it's that severe, then, we will be out there and we will, before we throw treats, we want to get, our investigation, collect our evidence before that happens. Okay. Also knowing that, like, if we're talking about an animal that's in severe neglect, BCS of a 1, and you start chucking a lot of food, that's also not that healthy for the animal too. Yeah. They need to be on a refeeding plan to slowly bring them back up to weight. So we would prefer you didn't. Mm-hmm. That's definitely one of the things that we encounter from the public. But when, if you're communicating with the investigator, sometimes we will tell you, like, we're not going to be there for 2 or 3 hours, go ahead and give the dog water. Like, that's fine, and we'll just, annotate that in our notes that the neighbor was feeding and still it's in this condition. Yeah. One of the bigger problems we have too is, removing the animal. Right. It's
big no-no.
Still called theft. Because again, animals are property. Yep. So if you decide that you're going to hop a fence and take a dog or an animal and bring it over so you can care for it, well, what you've done is against the law. We would definitely ask you not to do that, and that does ruin our case, because now if we think about that case going for a judge, and if I was the initial suspect, well, I'm going to say my dog was fine until you took it, and now it's in this condition. Yeah. That's going to be hard. So please, we ask the public, please don't do that.
So you need to be able to document them in the original conditions.
And there are cases, as I try to think of, primarily with apartment complexes. Maintenance person is going through a recently abandoned unit. They go in, there's a dog. Yeah. Well, their first thought is to remove the dog and bring it to the main office or whatever it is. Right. Again, not ideal, but we just need to know all of that information so we can put it in our report to so we can set the scene of how this happened and where it was found and why wasn't it here, and what were the conditions, and then we'll just need to get a sworn statement from him. Let's say if you found the dog locked inside a bathroom where there was no food and no water, we need to get a statement that says that to help with the case, to make sure it does get elevated and prosecuted to the furthest extent. Yeah,
so that is a plea to our audience, because I know the temptation is to break into somebody's yard, to pick them up. It seems like in the moment the right thing to do, and then it's very easy to say, well, I filed a cruelty report and the task force, the SPCA, said they had no case, but I'm handing the dog to them. Well, you have possession of the animal now, so please stop stealing dogs. Yes. I know it's hard, but in order to actually have the outcome that we envision as the right outcome, whether that is it's rehomed or the person is fined, taken to jail, whatever, investigators have to be able to see the animal in those conditions and document it and legally seize them.
Yes, please.
So that they are following a chain of evidence, essentially. Yes. Okay. That is I had a personal experience with someone screaming at me when they brought me a dog and said, I know whose dog this is and he doesn't take care of it and has a broken leg. And I said, you got to put the dog back or the cruelty investigators can't do anything about it. And it's a very uncomfortable position for the professionals to be in, because we know as animal lovers that we'd like to be able to help them immediately. Yes. But from a legal standpoint.
And we will still help the animal.
Right.
But if your successful outcome was prosecution, it might have been ruined.
Right. Yes, that is a very good point. You're not going to say, "Oh, can't do anything about it now."
Yeah, put it back and leave it now. We'll still,
help it, but
we'll get the animal care.
Yeah.
But the criminal case is definitely gone.
Is gone.
Maybe civilly, maybe, but
it just all depends. Well, this has been very enlightening. Even having been in this industry for a long time, I still learned some new things about the process, and hopefully our friends, our followers, and fellow animal lovers have also learned what it takes for a cruelty report to become the outcome that is best for the animal, whatever that looks like. And I think that this will hopefully help people make better cases for y'all, understanding what you need to know. So maybe it'll make your jobs easier as investigators. Thank you for you and for your team for everything that y'all do for the animals of the Gulf Coast, essentially, and beyond. We are fortunate to have probably more than most cities and counties have in defense of our animals. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. And
well, thank you for the invite too.
Oh,
appreciate it.
My pleasure. This has been Conversations for the Animals. Always good to catch up with an old friend. Thank y'all so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.